The undercover mission. The bass thrummed through the nightclub like a second heartbeat, vibrating against Fatima's ribs as she nursed her martini at the corner table. She looked like every other woman there, elegant black dress, subtle makeup, hair cascading down her shoulders. No one would guess she'd spent the last 6 hours studying security feeds and suspect profiles. No one would know her real name wasn't even on the guest list. Her earpiece crackled softly, disguised as a delicate pearl stud. "Target entering from the east entrance," her handler said. Fatima's eyes flickered toward the door without moving her head. There he was, Dmitry Volkov, suspected arms dealer, the reason she'd been stationed here for 3 weeks. She took another sip of her drink, letting the bitter liquid coat her tongue. Patience was her greatest weapon. Not guns, not reflexes. Patience and the ability to disappear into a crowd while seeing everything. The music shifted to something heavier. Bodies pressed closer on the dance floor. Fatima remained still, an island of calm in an ocean of movement. Her training had taught her that the best operatives weren't the ones who acted, they were the ones who observed. Who waited. Who understood that chaos was just information badly organized. That's when the first glass shattered. It happened near the bar, a collision between 2 men that escalated with the speed of gasoline meeting flame. One of them shoved the other into Fatima's table. Drinks crashed down. The martini she'd been nursing spilled across her dress, the ice cubes scattering like tiny frozen accusations. "Watch it," someone shouted. The music didn't stop. No one called security. This was the kind of place where small violence was expected, tolerated, sometimes even encouraged. Fatima watched the 2 men begin to circle each other, their movements growing sharper, more dangerous. The crowd around them was already forming a wider space, an arena. She should have stayed in her seat. Protocol said to remain invisible, to let security handle it. But the second man's fist was moving toward the first man's face, and she could see the trajectory would connect with brutal force. She could see the bottles behind the bar that would become weapons. She could see this becoming something serious, something that would draw police, and police meant her cover would be compromised. Fatima moved. She didn't rush. She glided between the 2 men with the grace of someone simply trying to escape the chaos. Her hand touched the first man's shoulder, not pushing, just grounding. Her voice was calm, low, meant only for them. "You're both better than this. Walk away." There was something in her tone that cut through the adrenaline fog. Not anger. Not fear. Just absolute certainty. The second man hesitated, his fist suspended in mid-air. For a moment, the entire scene balanced on the edge of a knife. Then, slowly, he lowered his arm. Both men stepped back, breathing heavily, the spell broken. Fatima straightened her dress and turned to return to her table. But as she moved through the crowd, she caught the eyes of someone watching from across the room. A man in an expensive suit, dark eyes, an expression of careful interest. He'd seen exactly what she'd done. And somehow, she knew this complicated everything. The stranger's perspective. Amir didn't believe in coincidences. As an architect, he understood that every structure had a blueprint, every moment had a reason. So when the woman in the black dress de-escalated that bar fight with nothing but her voice and presence, he knew he was witnessing something rare. He'd been at the nightclub to meet a client, a tedious evening that had turned unexpectedly interesting. Amir had planned to leave early, to return to his penthouse apartment overlooking the city he'd spent the last decade redesigning through his architecture firm. Instead, he found himself unable to look away from her. It wasn't her beauty, though she was undeniably beautiful. It was the way she moved. The way she assessed danger with the precision of someone trained to do exactly that. The way her eyes, for just one moment when she glanced at him, had been completely, utterly unguarded. Amir finished his whiskey and made a decision that surprised him. He was going to talk to her. He found her at the bar, ordering water. Of course she was. He smiled at that small detail. Most people would order another cocktail to steady their nerves after a confrontation like that. She was ordering water. Controlled. Deliberate. That took courage, he said, positioning himself beside her without crowding. Most people would have let that escalate. She turned to him slowly. He watched her eyes assess him in return, cataloguing, measuring, deciding. "Just common sense," she replied, her voice smooth as silk over steel. "Violence rarely solves anything." "Common sense isn't common," Amir said. "Neither is the kind of control you just demonstrated." He saw her shoulders tense slightly. "I was just trying to prevent property damage." "You were trying to prevent someone from getting seriously hurt. There's a difference." He extended his hand. "Amir Malik. I'm an architect." She hesitated, a fraction of a second that told him everything about her careful nature. Then she took his hand. Her grip was firm, confident, but he noticed she didn't hold on longer than necessary. "Fatima," she said simply. "Just Fatima." There was a story in that pause before the word just. Amir filed it away with the same attention he'd give to an architectural blueprint. "Just Fatima is enough," he said gently. "Would you have dinner with me? Somewhere quieter than this?" She should have said no. He could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the cost-benefit analysis of accepting. Whatever her real profession was, it required caution. It required distance. "Why?" she asked instead. "Because I'm curious about someone who thinks like you do," Amir answered honestly. "Because you're clearly carrying something heavy, and I'm not asking you to put it down. I'm just asking you to sit across from me for an evening. No expectations beyond that." Fatima studied him for a long moment. He didn't look away. He let her see that he meant what he said. No pressure, no agenda, just an invitation. "There's a restaurant on Malik Street," she said finally. "Tomorrow at 8. "But Amir," she paused, and something vulnerable flickered across her face before she could stop it. "People like me, we're complicated." "So am I," he said softly. "We're all complicated. Some of us are just better at hiding it than others." She almost smiled at that. Almost. "Tomorrow at 8, she confirmed, and then she was gone, disappearing into the crowd like she'd been trained to, leaving no trace, no pattern, nothing for anyone to follow. Amir remained at the bar, turning his whiskey glass slowly, understanding that he'd just accepted an invitation into something dangerous. Somehow, that made him want to walk into it even more. Danger closes in. The phone call came at 3 a.m. Fatima's handler's voice was terse, urgent. Operation timeline accelerated. Target moving faster than anticipated. You need to be in position by dawn. She hung up without responding. That was protocol. And she lay beside Amir in the darkness, feeling the moment she'd been dreading settle over them like ash. She'd known this would happen. She'd warned him. But knowing and experiencing were entirely different things. Amir was already awake. He'd learned to read her sleep patterns, the way her muscles tensed when work was calling. "How long?" he asked into the darkness. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "The operation could conclude in days. Or weeks. Or—" She didn't finish. They both knew the or. "Then we don't waste the time we have," he said, pulling her closer. The next 72 hours were a blur of careful normalcy and underlying terror. Fatima went through her daily routines while simultaneously preparing for something Amir couldn't know the details of. She left him cryptic messages disguised as loving texts. Think of the building with the blue entrance. Remember the 3rd floor of the museum. Places they'd been. Places he could find her if things went wrong. Amir tried to maintain his architectural projects, but his mind wasn't on blueprints. It was on the woman moving through their apartment like she was memorizing it. Memorizing him. On the 3rd night, she finally told him what she could. "The organization I'm investigating is trafficking information," she said quietly. "Classified military intelligence. They have contacts in 3 countries. My job is to identify them, document everything, and get out." "And if you can't get out?" Amir asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then the agency extracts me. But that means disappearing. New identity, new location, new life. You wouldn't be able to follow." Amir felt something break inside his chest. There has to be another way. "There isn't," Fatima said, and her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. This is what I signed up for. This is who I am. You're more than that, he insisted. You're the woman who sang off-key in the shower this morning. You're the person who feeds the neighborhood cats from my terrace. You're someone who loves deeply and carefully, Anne. Amir, she interrupted, her eyes wet, I need you to listen to me. If something happens, if I have to disappear, I need you to let me go. I need you to understand that this is bigger than us. No, he said flatly. That's not a condition I accept. She moved to him then, cupping his face in her hands. Then I'm asking you to be brave in a different way. Be brave enough to let me do what I need to do. Be brave enough to wait if you can. But if you can't, be brave enough to move on. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. Come back to me, he whispered. That's the only brave thing I need from you. The next morning, she was gone. Amir found only a note on his pillow, written in her careful handwriting, the building with the blue entrance. 3rd floor of the museum. If you don't hear from me in 30 days, live your life. But know that every moment with you was real. F. He spent the next month in a state of controlled panic. He went to work, met with clients, attended meetings. But every moment was hollow. He waited for a phone call that didn't come. A message. Any sign that she was alive. On day 29, there was a break-in at his apartment. He came home to find his security system disabled and a single envelope on his kitchen table. Inside was a photograph of him with Dmitry Volkov's associates, people he'd never met, people he didn't know were dangerous. And a note. You've become leverage. We know about Fatima. We'll use you to find her. Unless you disappear. DV. Amir's hands shook as he realized the truth. His relationship with Fatima hadn't been a secret. And now, he was a weapon in someone else's hands. He made a decision that would change everything. He called his office and told them he was taking a leave of absence. He gathered essentials and cash. And then he drove to the one place Fatima had marked as safe. The building with the blue entrance. The 3rd floor of the museum. Choosing each other. The old museum on Malik Street had been closed to the public for renovations. Amir used the key he'd hidden in his apartment months ago, a key Fatima had left without explanation, which now made perfect sense. She'd been planning for contingencies. Planning for him. The 3rd floor was dimly lit, dust particles floating through thin streams of afternoon light. Paintings covered in white sheets lined the walls like ghosts. Amir moved through the silence with his heart hammering against his ribs. He found her in the east wing, standing in front of an ancient portrait of a woman with knowing eyes. You came, Fatima said, not turning around. You knew I would, he replied. I hoped. She finally turned to face him, and he could see how much she'd aged in 30 days. There were new lines around her eyes, a wariness that hadn't been there before. You received the photographs. How did you? My handler found them during the operation. Dmitry Volkov is in custody. His associates are being rounded up. But before they took him, he made sure to leave that message. She moved toward Amir slowly, like he might disappear if she rushed. Which means you're in danger as long as you're connected to me. Then I'll stop being connected to you, Amir said, pulling her into his arms. Or I'll move with you. Or I'll do whatever it takes. But I'm not losing you again. She sobbed against his chest, releasing all the fear and exhaustion and impossible choices she'd been carrying alone. The agency says I can leave, she said finally. My handler is recommending me for termination from active duty. My cover is blown. My usefulness is over. Which means... She pulled back to look at him. I can choose a different life. If you still want me. If I still want you. Amir laughed, a broken, relieved sound. Fatima, I want you so much it terrifies me. I want to build a life with you. Boring. Normal. Safe. I want to wake up next to you knowing that the worst danger we face is burned toast and missed deadlines. We'll never be completely safe, she warned. There will be people from my past. Complications. I'll always be looking over my shoulder. I know, he said. And you'll have me there. looking over both our shoulders. They stood in the museum as evening fell, surrounded by art that had survived centuries, by images of people long dead who'd loved and suffered and persisted anyway. Fatima made her phone call then, her voice steady as she told her handler she was walking away. When she hung up, she was no longer an operative. She was simply Fatima, or whatever her real name was. It didn't matter anymore. We should leave the city, Amir said, thinking strategically the way architects did. Start somewhere new, where no one knows us. I'd like that, Fatima agreed. But first, there's something I need to show you. She led him to a safe deposit box she'd maintained under an alias, a backup plan within a backup plan. Inside were documents, passports, and photographs, and a handwritten journal dating back years, filled with observations about him. Amir flipped through it, stunned. The earliest entry was dated 3 days after they first met. I wasn't supposed to notice him. Wasn't supposed to let anyone distract me from my mission. But Amir Malik has the kind of integrity that makes you believe in things again. He sees people, really sees them, and he accepts what he sees. I wonder if he could see all of me and not flinch away. His eyes burned with tears as he read entry after entry chronicling her gradual fall into love. The moment she realized it. The way she'd fought it. The night she finally gave in. You loved me before you even trusted me, he whispered. I was terrified of you, she corrected gently. Still am, sometimes. Because you make me want things I thought I'd given up. A real home. A real name. A real life where I'm not always watching. Where I can just be. Then let's build that, Amir said, closing the journal. Let's go somewhere far away and buy a house. You can garden if you want. Take up pottery. Sleep past 6 a.m. All those normal things you never let yourself do. What about your career? Fatima asked. Your firm. My partner can handle it. Or I'll design remotely. I have more important architecture to focus on, he smiled, cupping her face in his hands. Building a life with you. They left the city 3 weeks later, driving toward a small coastal town neither had visited before. They rented a cottage with a view of the sea, and Amir sketched designs for a house they'd build together. Fatima planted herbs in the garden and discovered she loved the feel of soil under her fingernails, the simplicity of nurturing something that couldn't lie or betray. She started using her real name, Salma, after the legal paperwork came through. She volunteered at a local literacy center, teaching languages to refugee children. No one asked about her past. No one questioned her carefully modulated accent or the way her eyes still tracked exits in crowded rooms. Amir didn't ask her to stop being cautious. He understood that some things became part of you, worn into your DNA like water wearing stone smooth. Instead, he simply held her hand and reminded her, every single day, that she was safe. One evening, 6 months after they'd left the city, Amir found Salma on their cottage porch, watching the sunset. He designed their home to wrap around her, to give her angles and sightlines and safe spaces. It was, in many ways, his greatest architectural achievement. Do you regret it? She asked, not turning around. Leaving your life for someone broken? Amir kissed the top of her head. You're not broken. You're someone who survived impossible things. And I didn't leave my life, I chose a better one. He pulled her back against his chest. Besides, I finally understand what all those buildings I designed were missing. They never had you in them. Salma, who had been Fatima, who had been a dozen other names and identities, leaned into him and let herself believe that this was real. That they'd actually made it. That love could be enough. The truth about her had come slowly, revealed in layers like an archaeological dig. But the truth about them was simple. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones most worthy of love. And sometimes salvation doesn't come in the form of rescue. Sometimes it comes in the form of someone ordinary, like an architect, who looks at all your fractured pieces and chooses to build something beautiful with them anyway. The end.